Hello, this is Vivica Williams, and you're watching Head to Head. In 2016, Ukraine began introducing a compulsory qualification assessment for judges. This reboot of its judiciary also involves the selection of new judges and the creation of new courts. So, how has the process been going so far? Well, to discuss this, we welcome to the studio today Georg Stawa, international expert of the EU Pravo-Justice project. Hello, thanks for coming.
It's a pleasure. Good evening.
So now, this project, this compulsory selection and assessment of judges, is quite unique for Ukraine. First of all, before we get into why it's so unique, let's talk a little bit about how the project started and how it's gotten to where it is now.
In general, this is one of these, let's call it, typical EU-funded projects which are looking for support of the reform process and cooperation on international level with our Ukrainian counterparts. In part of this project, one of the tasks is that an expert team was invited to look into the newly set up procedure on how to select judges and how to assess them.
And how many judges have so far been passed through this new system?
The task is a huge one. You have more than 6,000 judges to assess, and a few hundreds, almost 1,000, are already processed. And this is an ongoing task for the next 1 and 2 years. So it is quite something which is a big maneuver, especially as selecting and requalification of judges is, of course, a very sensitive issue.
Absolutely. And when you say requalification, what kind of standards are included in this? The
design of the process is in that way done that there was a look around in Europe about standards and the question how to come up with all the best practices if you want to build up a new process ideally. So in the now set up process and procedure, you find elements like exams written and orally. You find the necessity to have a court hearing. You have a psychological test, which is looking for the ideal judge as well. And all this is put together. And which is unique in Ukraine, civil society is also invited to participate in respect of the Public Integrity Council, a cluster of NGOs, critical journalists, or social activists who may introduce their questions and who are invited to come up with even critical facts.
No, this is definitely a necessary part. We know how active civil society is in Ukraine, especially when it comes to anti-corruption. And with this new committee, how much is their opinion taken into, or their fact-finding taken into account? So do they have the opportunity to, does their voice or what they find have a large effect on how, if that judge is selected or not, if they find that that judge has been involved in some type of corrupt or questionable activities?
The most important part from the political perspective is to raise the trust into judiciary. Therefore, everybody within that kind of surrounding of Public Integrity Council, or who is represented in the Public Integrity Council, may come up with critical questions or facts in regard of specific candidates. And these kind of critical questions or suspicious background is put into the public in the hearing, and the candidate is invited to respond on that kind of questions and maybe even suspicious facts. This is done a little bit in the way like an expert would contribute to a court hearing. And these kind of facts, which are discussed in the public hearing, which is also streamed online and made public, is then considered by the High Qualification Commission in their final decisions.
And so what have you seen with, are there some kind of cases that you've seen that findings have had a significant consideration and judges have not been selected because of some type of findings?
Of course, this happened. So it happens that some findings and arguments are put on the table, which are then reflected by the decision in the way that some candidates are not accepted, or even these kind of critical facts turned out not being objective enough and then were abolished by the Commission. So it is a little bit like in a court hearing procedure. But one point is very important to underline, that almost a third of the judges did not apply anymore for the reselection procedure due to the fact knowing what is ahead and knowing that these kind of critical questions can be addressed. So if we ask for the results of the procedure, it is definitely first-hand to say, despite of the single cases in the procedure which have been dealt by the High Qualification Commission, that almost a third of the judges did refuse from going into the procedure.
So this definitely is showing that we'll see that people take themselves out of the running if they know they may be unlikely to pass this. Now, you said there's a psychological testing. Tell us the significance of this, and what more specifically are you looking for with this test?
This psychological test is trying to clear if someone is able to fulfill the criteria of a judge by objective tests, something which is done in every other kind of assessment center for private companies as well. So you have a general part where I don't know, your intelligence, your ability to work speedy, etc. is tested. And then, of course, also some more, let's call it judge-related issues are checked. More or less, for example, if someone is able to decide about a case or not by his psychological status and abilities. If you look for judges, of course you look for this kind of impeccable, ideal, super 100% perfect fit colleague. But on the other hand, as we are all humans, there may be someone who has excellent test results from the university or passing the exams, but on the other hand, not really fitting that kind of job, where it is necessary to be able to decide very quickly, to listen carefully, etc. Even if you're the best lawyer, maybe you are lacking a little bit on this and you're better in another job. So the testing always has a little bit an eye on that.
Okay.
But also we have to say that even on other countries who are using that kind of psychological testing, judge candidates, you have to say that even the best testing is not giving you the 100% automatic results. So it is not you feed someone in a computer and then the computer is telling you the perfect colleagues. There's always some room for discretion, and you have to check the personality, personal hearing, etc.
Absolutely. You need to have that human qualification to check to see the final results, the final decisions. And is there a focus on like a national level judges, or regional or local, or is it just whoever comes first in this out of these almost 6,000 judges?
I'm quite not informed about how it is organized right now. It is a little bit of course, the first focus was on resetting the Supreme Court, and on the ordinary courts there's a regional approach depending on the region and the location. But there is some kind of master plan, but this was not part of our study. So this is the way how this reform is implemented then by the authorities.
In November, the Pravo-Justice put out a report looking at how the evaluation has going. So what were some of the positives and negatives and things you think need to be addressed, or that have worked so far very well?
The positive was said, or is definitely, that the procedure is unique in the way that civil society is allowed to take part of it. There is no other European country which is allowing civil society to be in any kind part of selection of judges' procedure. Usually this is a procedure which is done behind more or less locked doors by the authorities, and the public may trust it or not. Here the definite modern thing is civil society is invited to speak up, or if you don't speak up, then please shut up for the rest of your life, like a little bit like in the wedding.
It's hard to be able to, when you're given an opportunity to complain or to present evidence, then later not to yeah, you have to, if you don't accept the judgment and you want to complain later, you were given this opportunity, is what you're saying.
This is another perspective. It is not to get an improvement on the trust only to focus on the selection procedure of judges, where the civil society is now invited to take part of it, which is a unique thing. But we do not have to miss the point that later on, when a judge is administering justice, also, of course, monitoring of performance and quality has to be taken in place, and disciplinary measures and disciplinary courts must, of course, rule and self-clean later
Absolutely.
on. So it is not only to wash someone in one single procedure, clean, white, and then it is, and you may administer justice for the next 30, 40 years. But of course, the system must provide some additional checks and cleaning measures afterwards if someone is developing in the wrong way, which may happen, as all of them are humans, and this usual way of sometimes happens.
Absolutely. And so do you think that the procedures that are being done are helping to build trust from citizens? We know that in the past, Ukrainians have given very low trust ratings to the judiciary system, which has been an issue when we look at reforms and which have been perceived as the most successful. Unfortunately, judiciary system reforms have remained kind of low in how people trust. So do you see that there's been some change in that based on this kind of a new system of evaluation?
In general, reading the surveys which are done frequently, there is raise of trust into Ukrainian judiciary. So the level of trust raised definitely over the last 2 years, depending likely not only on this kind of reform, but on several reforms in parallel. So you can see an effort of the reform activities, but still there is room for improvement, definitely. And all these kind of activities ahead have to have this in mind, raise the trust into the Ukrainian judiciary.
And just a last question. The Pravo-Justice project ends in 2020. So what are you seeing that's next between now and next year, and what you're envisioning to happen after this project ends?
Speaking about now the upcoming phases or months, speaking as an expert hired by the project, it is planned that some of the recommendations and improvements we found out by the report last year are tackled now and are implemented together with High Qualification Commission, together with representatives of the Public Integrity Council, to improve the procedure and to make it productive, which is, of course, a task to be delivered. And this makes the whole activity sustainable, and we're looking forward and gladly to cooperate with all the stakeholders over the next weeks and months to get it even more on track than it was.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for bringing us an update and giving us an insight into how this project has been working and how the judiciary reform is going so far in this evaluation of judges.
Thank you very much.
That was Georg Stawa, international expert of the EU Pravo-Justice project. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned with UATV for more.